Welcome to the Vibrant Living Network. Have you ever wondered what is possible beyond possible? What is the thing you've been wondering and inquiring about? Are you just feeling stuck and don't know why? Are you thinking or are you seeing? Seeing allows us to expand and have this other experience. We want to invite you for that wake-up call. We want to invite your spirit, your soul, so to be more alive, more connected. Glenn Brooks has been a life coach for over 33 years, author of Divorced to Patterns, Not Each Other, an explorer of what is possible. He has worked with people all around the world. Join us for a wake-up conversation, a dialogue with you. We will have some of the most interesting contributors. We will be talking to some of the most interesting people and have some of the most resourceful teachers, wisdom-filled people from around the world join us. Share your voice, ask the questions, become free of the known into a new world of possibility. We are going to talk about all the things you wonder about: how to live, how to heal, how to connect, how to love, how to be seen. Your life is precious. Enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Glenn Brooks. Welcome. It's good being with you today along with Kai Cole. Just reflecting on this life, this thing we have called our lives. Well, Kai, before we have our two wonderful contributors and team members, Dr. Gerry Leisman, Dr. Noam Shealy, I'm just so honored to bring this level of dialogue to you guys. Earlier today, I just realized, because I was telling someone a story how did I start Vibrant Speakers for movers, people that use movement therapy, dancers, martial artists, people in the Alexander technique, all this range of movement. And so how I started that was when people would come to see me around becoming a Vibrant Speaker, I would usually walk with them and I would ask them, instead of speaking to me, to move their body, to move their message. And as people moved, a lot of times they discovered, and this could be sometimes they would dance, sometimes they would just kind of, when you were a kid and you wanted to say something to the class, a lot of times you felt it in your body, but you had to raise your hand, you might miss it. So I was just realizing the impact of being around people that were willing to kind of drop their script. And I was thinking, in honor of today's program, I put together an event where we had Dr. Gerry from Harvard as a world-class pulmonary specialist who uses so much imagery now. He uses a lot of imagery. He questions a lot of the standards of medicine. He's very, very close to the show, Dr. Gerry. We had a mime in our event. We had authors come, we had other movers come. And what was interesting was each person I realized that came to that event went beyond the script of what they knew. They went beyond what they knew to have a different conversation. On today's program, we have Dr. Noam Shealy, he's a family member of mine. He's been with me through some really challenging times, and he had me really question what this thing called pain is, because we had pain on so many levels. There's invisible pain we can't even language. We just sense it's there, and sometimes we don't know it's there or not until it leaves. He's pioneered some wonderful books on the topic of healing and initiating the self-restorative response. Well, no, let me ask you this. I mean, we'll like Gerry in the conversation. At the end of last week's program, you were saying that there's some practices, progressive relaxation, imagery. And you said something very bold. People travel the world to see you to develop protocols to help them with pain. And you were saying that if people had these practices to train their systems, you were saying it would eliminate 80% of a lot of the chronic and some acute conditions that people experience that are sort of considered normal, whether it be hyperventilation or kind of the things that are aggravated by anxiety and stress. So you made a very bold statement, and Kim Shi was with us. He's on a plane right now to Jordan. Kim Shi Moore is a very important team member. He's a Resopath. And I told Kim Shi I would pick up with that question with you about the practices that people could do on a daily basis that you said would clear maybe up to 80% of some of these underlying strain, depression that would set them up for illness and pain. Welcome, by the way.
Yep, great to be with you. Well, basically, if you set your mind properly to what you want to do, you can overcome almost anything. Now, obviously, before you start to control pain with your mind, you want to be sure what's going on. But if if you've got an acute appendix, you don't want to be using your mind to quiet down the pain. You want to get it operated on.
Right. Yeah.
But once you know that the primary cause is not treatable or curable, and especially if you've already had one surgery to try to correct it, then it's like marriage. The second surgery is less likely to be successful than the first. So I don't believe in multiple surgeries for the same problem. Yeah. That's how I got started, actually, back in the early 70s. My average patient had between 5 and 7 unsuccessful operations. And to me, the patients were as crazy as the surgeons for allowing that to happen. And that's when I got into this of training the mind. Now, there are among other things, 3 major subdivisions of our retraining the brain. Obviously, you have to relax, but that's essential for all kinds of things. Then, the second procedure to go after, the first real pain-relieving procedure, is to use your breathing to collect as if it was a vacuum cleaner sucking it up. And you go through your whole body to get rid of any unusual sensations, and then you concentrate for 5 or 10 minutes just on collecting the pain with the breath like a vacuum cleaner and blowing it away. And that can work extremely well. Now, if that doesn't work, the next best technique is to, let's say it is your low back, just the low back itself, right above the sacrum.
Mm-hmm.
And the best thing is first to train yourself to imagine breathing in and out through the skin of your right hand. And if you will take every breath in and out, imagining that you're breathing in and out only through the skin of your right hand, within 20 minutes it will become numb. And once you've learned to do that, then it's easy to move it to an area of pain and breathe in and collect the pain and out. And again, if you do it for 20 minutes, you can almost always make that area numb. Finally, we are electrical. Everything in our body is electrical. We are much like a living car battery. Everything in it is chemical, but also electrical. And electricity creates magnetism. Now, most people have seen pictures of Christ or saints with a golden, often white or golden light around them. Well, that is really an artistic rendition of the electromagnetic energy field of the aura. Now, some of us, about 20% of people, see the energy field around people. And so I tell people to start with the feet and imagine that they are expanding the electromagnetic energy field 1 inch in diameter. And to allow that 1 inch to flow around the ankles, calves, knees, and thighs, under the buttocks, over the groin, around the low abdomen and the back, around the chest in all directions, around the shoulders, all the parts of the arms down to the fingertips, around the neck and face and head. So that, this takes several minutes. By the time you get to the top of the head, you should feel and sense as if you're seeing a 1 inch halo envelope capsule around the entire body. Then you turn your attention back to your feet. Start with a 12-inch expanded energy field. And then you take the 12 inches all the way up to the very top of the body. Now, when you feel, sense, see in your mind that your entire body is surrounded by a 12-inch energy field, halo capsule, whatever, then your mind is brilliantly alert, but your body feels as if it's floating in space or absent. Tremendous pain reliever. Then you can take all kinds of trips. This is the introduction of, if I were going to do, for instance, a past life therapy session, I would put them in in this state and do a few other things to get them there. But just for pain relief, you start with feeling as if you're floating in your 12-inch capsule. These are the three best single techniques for controlling pain.
Thank you. You know, Kai, I wanted to have your voice come through. It's such a wonderful format that to have, Dr. Norm and Dr. Gerry. I mean, I think in some ways what kind of turned my life around was very early in my life I had really bad headaches, really bad sinus headaches. And my father had sinus headaches, and it was kind of the unquestioned thing. Like my mother said, well, you just have them because your father has them. And I got on a medication because the pediatrician was kind of like God. And I started having insomnia. And somewhere along the line, I wandered into it was a magazine store, and I read a magazine on sugar, an article on sugar, and I realized, wow, there's a lot of sugar in my diet. And I started to change my diet, but it stretched me. And I kept meeting people, by the way, who were having, strokes or different syndromes. And I got really curious why certain people would buy into the graven image, the image that the health practitioners gave them with absolutely no education or practices. I want to mention this conference coming up at Harvard in July with Dr. Gerry Leisman, who's with us today. What I love about the conference, Gerry, what I love what you're doing, and I want you to comment on this further because I thought it's interesting having you on with Norm today. We were having this wonderful discussion about how in medicine, there's some brilliant people in medicine, but a lot of times they're in their own box, they're in their own department. So as an example, a lot of people don't get taught these kinds of regulatory exercises. And so a lot of people are dealing with the secondary impact of both, you could say, the diagnosis, the shock of the diagnosis, but then their body is kind of treated like a shopping bag to bring along. So what I love about what you're doing at the conference at Harvard is you're kind of bringing together this deeper dialogue, and people are coming from around the world to share their experience with different of these movements. What I call the moving medicine. I guess, you said on the last show that is an example in Parkinson's. There's movement you could do where it could activate the system. Like you were talking about the limitations of neurologists, and some people get to see things through their own perspective. Someone is listening. How could they? I wanted to catch something practical for you to take, because a lot of people, they're locked in a certain medical protocol. What's the first place that you start to kind of get out of the box of being in a medical protocol that's missing things like, as an example, movement, dance, qigong, tai chi, yoga, some of these movement therapies, and progressive relaxation. Because I agree with you about the conference that people are coming to share things that a lot of time they hadn't heard of as patients and or professionals. Welcome, Gerry.
Well, thanks for having me on again. Let me run through some of my process for how I got into all of this. My first degree is in music, which has nothing to do with any of this, apparently, but apparently it does. Then medicine, and then psychology, neuroscience, and biomedical engineering. And unfortunately, because it was about 50 years ago, it all happened in bits and pieces. And so one of the things that medical training is involved in, I'm an academic, one of the problems we have is the issue of time. Time actually doesn't exist. Space-time is actually what does. But we have an awful lot of information to cram down, and literally cram down the heads and throats of medical students. There just simply isn't enough time to get the big picture, and you need to get through your board exams. And so what you're left with is an introduction to pathology, an introduction to neurology, and an introduction to OBGYN, obstetrics and gynecology, and so on. And then ultimately, or penultimately, you find your specialty, and you focus inside of your little box. And you need to do it that way, because if any physician that would treat me, for example, did what I did, would probably wind up dead. And that is, well, give me a couple of weeks to figure this out, and let me do some lab work. And so you need to really have the automaticity in this program. But the luxury that science has, or scientists have, is the ability to to reflect, to study, to reflect, and to ask questions, not to answer them, but to ask them. And I think that the ultimate issue with all of us in the healthcare professions is asking the right questions, not giving the right answers. The public relies on answers from physicians, but I think it's probably the point that you ask the correct question. So let me give you an example. We, at birth, have a paucity of interconnectivities between neurons, which means that we need to develop more neurons so that we can make more connections. When you get to early childhood or middle childhood, there are exuberant connectivities. So the capacity to learn is enormous, and that's not particularly efficient. And the reason it's not efficient is because you really want to automate the system. So what we do through the course of our development is we make connectivities between neurons and dendrites, and we perform our activities of daily living in an automatic fashion. And that includes how we automatically react to the people around us. It includes pain. It includes aggression. It includes the kinds of things that we automate. And so what the typical model that psychologists, neuropsychologists, and neurologists and physicians use is that the left hemisphere is concerned with language and the right hemisphere with spatial skills, and the frontal lobes are concerned with decision-making. And if you actually believe that stuff, you're completely in the wrong direction. And the reason you are is because if you have specific brain areas contributing to specific functions, and only that, you're going to need to explain why it is that post-stroke, 6 months post-stroke, someone who has a lesion in the area that controls expressive language can start to talk if there's damage to that part of the brain that controls it. So it's about the networks. And that is a take that most practicing physicians don't have because there isn't time to really understand it in that context. So when Dr. Shiri was talking about pain before, the same issues that happen with how we learn includes how we learn to manifest pain. Pain is a response that tells us something's wrong, go fix it. And there are any number of ways of that for that to trip off. So you can have an argument with someone and you want to get out of it. You'll be in pain. You don't want to go to school one day. You'll be in pain. And how you get out of that pain is about relearning. Well, how do we learn and how do we make these connections? How do we break them? Underneath all of this process is a subject.
Gerry, we're gonna take a brief pause. We're gonna take a brief pause and continue with this. Also engage Dr. Norm, and of course, brilliant Kai Cole, who's my co-host, and I just love her contribution. Stay with us. Your life is precious, and we're discovering how to make it more precious right here on Vibrant Living with you today. Stay with us.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
In the wake of a disaster, what one thing can you send that will help people the most? A blanket, a tent, a sandbag, a doctor. Actually, if you send a monetary donation, you send all these things. Even a small donation can make a big impact and can quickly become exactly what people affected by disaster need most.
In the wake of a hurricane, your monetary donation can make a huge difference to those in need. To donate, visit supporthurricanerelief.org. That's supporthurricanerelief.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hello, you're listening to the Vibrant Living Radio Network, where we help you dissolve some of those things, those beliefs that are like part of your disease. But when Dr. Gerry was talking, Kai, I wanted to see what bubble. I was really enjoying the opening where Dr. Norm talked about the progressive relaxation and really this bigger sense of how we could connect. And Gerry, I realized as you were speaking that it just makes sense why a lot of people, their catastrophes have a lot to do with more external answers and not much the inquiry and the gentleness of seeing is often missing. Kai, I wanted to get your comment because that was quite an opening. I really enjoyed both kind of, seeing beyond the usual, as I like to say, beyond the formula. Wanted to see how it spoke to you, and then I want to maybe have Norm comment, but wanted to see how it impacted you, Kai. What bubbled for you?
I also wanted to just give a little bit of presence for Kim Chi Moyer, who is our amazing experiential traveling journalist, as you said, that's in Jordan. Her website is resopathy.com, resopathy.com, and she made some amazing contributions to this subject last episode. Also, I just want to give my thanks to Regulat, that's regulat-usa.com, who has provided us with an amazing resource for a probiotic drink with phytonutrients as well. But what's coming up for me is that I'm having questions about the difference between addressing pain and chronic pain. Glenn, I know that this lies close to your heart when you're speaking about the headaches that you've experienced in the past. I'm wondering what the difference is energetically and how we can address it on a day-to-day basis.
It's beautiful. The worst pain I ever experienced, because one of the things I wanted to get in today, I was listening to National Public Radio. I was listening to Norm about the progressive and Dr. Gerry. I was listening to a swimmer from the Olympics. And one of the things he was talking about, we'll cover the headaches for sure, because I haven't had a headache. Wow, it's an amazing thing living your life without headaches when you have headaches. She was talking about she thought she was dying. She was having these terrible pains in her chest. And someone had explained to her she had heartbreak syndrome, which I was kind of going through. I hadn't given language to it. No one had spoken to me about it. I had gone through what I call a relational tsunami, and I started talking to Dr. Norm, and I realized just a discussion in a bigger context, I felt seen and that I was going through something. And another part of this conversation, Gerry, is a lot of times people don't have a framework or a sense of where they are in pain. Usually they get scripts and they get medications, they get protocols. And one of the beautiful things that we do both is we have the opportunity to people who do different therapies, movement therapies. They look at the brain, they look at the body as more of a unified system. They have a systems approach rather than more of a fragmented approach. But I love you. Norm, why don't you step in? And then we'll go back to Gerry. I love Gerry's introduction, and I thought about you because I realized that in some sense, 34 through 35 years ago when I read you, I realized that you were addressing the missing element, this fragmented non-system approach, and kind of how people often felt dwindled and disconnected. They had answers, but didn't feel whole. And I feel like you kind of stepped in and asked some different questions, and I realized going back to Gerry's the inquiry, and yeah, if you want to comment on Kai's thing about headaches, because headaches are, impacting so many people, and I realized that it's, a lot of times they're so in the midst of fighting against illness and battling it from a limited, narrow box, a box of information, not really looking at the person as a wisdom system. So, Norm, I'd love to get your comment on the headaches, the heartbreak syndrome, and anything that Dr. Gerry said, which I love and appreciate what Dr. Gerry's bringing to this conference and his inquiry very much.
So which one of us do you want to go first?
What's that?
I thought you were asking Gerry first, and now you're asking me. So which one do you want to answer first?
I know. I got to flip a coin. I guess I'm so enthused and touched by both of you. Why don't you go ahead and I thought Gerry's opening would speak to you deeply, because clearly as a neurosurgeon you had to become a new breed of physician to do what you do. So why don't we go back to you to comment on what Gerry said, and then let's talk about the headaches and maybe the heartbreak syndrome. So it's to you, Dr. Norm.
Well, obviously, a diagnosis of why. I mean, there are at least 6 things that can cause a headache, and a proper physician can usually make a diagnosis based upon the history and the physical exam. I mean, let's take one of the most severe of headaches is migraine. Now, some people are prone to migraine, and it often begins in the early adolescent years. And that is one of the easiest of all to control. But you need to be sure you're working with migraine. Elmer Green, back in the late 60s until early 1971, demonstrated that he could have patients 84% of the time totally control their migraine headache just by learning to warm the right hand mentally. And it takes people about a week to learn how to do that, but it is definitely 10 times better and safer than any drug in the world. Drugs are, repetitive over and over again. Once you learn biofeedback, at the beginning of a headache, you can turn it off by warming up your right hand. Now, if that does not work, my second line of approach would be riboflavin, one of the basic B vitamins. 400 milligrams a day of that is, again, safer and more effective than any drug in the world. Now, there are other things. Some people have migraine because of specific stress reactions, and for them, we've got to deal with whatever that particular psychological emotional stress is. And if everything else fails, of course, as with any pain or any other symptom, I would do a past life therapy session. I consider this, for the broadest range of all kinds of problems, a single past life therapy session can cure more than all other things in medicine combined.
Now, you probably didn't learn that in medical school or at neurosurgery training. That was one of the things you had to do as a new breed of physician. You had to radically stretch beyond your linear brain to another whole realm. How did that come in your life? Since you mentioned it, did that come in your life? How did that come in your life? How did you begin with some of your colleagues who probably say it was crazy?
By 1966, I had essentially given up on conventional medicine for all kinds of chronic pain. Now, acute pain, it can sometimes be very useful. But the idea of multiple surgical and destructive surgical procedures to treat chronic pain, to me, is barbarian. And so I developed first, intuitively, electrical stimulation of the spinal cord. And when I introduced that to the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, they screamed and yelled and said I was stupid. When I gave my first 6 patient reports, every neurosurgeon in the room wanted to do it. I often say surgeons rush in where angels fear to tread. But then I'm getting 400 people from around the world sent to me for the spinal cord stimulator, and 94% of them were so damaged with 7 unsuccessful operations and multiple drugs that I did not consider them to be candidates even for the spinal cord stimulator. So I developed behavior modification and an active behavior modification program in which we put the patient in the hospital for, an average of a month, and kept them busy from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in the evening. And we had a 75% cure rate that first year of people who had been invalids sometimes for 30 years. Gradually then I added biofeedback, and I was already doing acupuncture. And that's when I developed this more elaborate retraining system that I call biogenics. So it was a gradual process, but it did take sort of awareness that we need to look elsewhere.
You know, Gerry, Dr. Gerry, you're listening to Dr. Norm and kind of looking at what I might call a new vibrant medicine, a medicine that inquires and treats people at a deeper level than rather than the boxes we're trained in. What the vision of this conference, the vision of the conference that you're doing is very much having people not just go beyond, include conventional treatment, but also appreciate, like you've said many times, that is an example. You used Parkinson's. You said that even a neurosurgeon or a neurologist misses some of these connections, which I find fascinating. What would you want to say or comment to people in response to what Norm just said? I just had a friend of mine read a book. It's called Beyond the Pillbox. From where you sit and how you're listening, what's a practical guideline so that people could get out of the loop of not just leave this treatment, but also refer back to the body? Because I know a good part of the conference is about movement and also the brain. What's your take from what Dr. Norm said and just what you want to share, kind of give to the audience about as being a patient who could generate a different experience because they have another level of I guess wisdom themselves. Like they have a sense that the answers they're getting thrown at them about their body, because that's really the vision of your conference, is to have a bigger conversation about movement, the brain, and cognition. What's coming to you that you want to share with people? I'm just in awe. I love the conference, and I love that people are presenting things that oftentimes are not presented at hospitals or physical therapy office. That you really this cross dialogue. And after listening to Norm again, I'm just appreciating that what it takes. You know, Dr. Sue Johnson, who just came up with the new attachment theory, was saying she almost died. It was very hard for her to bring this to her colleagues. They were very resistant to this innovation, to this other way of seeing the attachment theory. And she was saying that what saved her in some ways, it was her attachment and connection with her husband. New ideas and exploring new terrain is not easy. And that's what you're doing.
Well, my response is very, very clear. Before the break, we were talking about the fact that there's a reason for the adult to automate as much as human behavior, neuro behavior, as possible. And the reason is we don't have time to think about digesting in order to digest, or how it is that we walk in order to walk. So we need to automate the process. But quite practically and clinically, if you see a patient who's been damaged in some way, then they do on their own have the capacity to repair. And that's got a lot to do with the networks. What about the networks? In early childhood, they're developing. And what's underneath that development is a substance called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And that's what's underneath the issue of neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the ability of the nervous system to reorganize itself in response to ... So the method underneath that is BDNF. What influences the production of BDNF? Quite simply, movement. So the more you move, the greater the likelihood you have of making effective connections or reconnections. But what's underneath it, of course, is movement. And that's one of the reasons that young children, toddlers especially, move as much as they do. So movement has a lot to do with cognition, has a lot to do with reorganizing networks of the brain. Now, the issue is we make bad networks sometimes. So we get into habits. Yeah, pain can be a habit. And now I'm responding to Dr. Sheely's comments from before. We get into bad habits, pain, and pain can be a habit. How do you break that? How do you reorganize that? And one way is talk therapy can do that. Cognitive behavioral therapy does very well. So does neurofeedback. There's a lot of work going on in the neuromodulation laboratories at Spalding in the Boston area, precisely on these kinds of alternatives. In fact, they're actually linked, I hate the word, but alternative medicine or complementary therapies. Complementary sounds like it's complementing something else, and I don't mean in a complementary fashion, the other spelling of it. It isn't. It's just another piece of the overall puzzle. So let me give you an anecdote, and maybe that's the answer to the question. Maybe not applied to pain, but it can be. I gave a lecture about 4 or 5 years ago at Oxford in the UK, on my thing, which is the relationship between movement and cognition and how the brain plays with this. And basically my argument is that it dumbs down the human being with lack of movement, and you can make yourself smarter by moving. Unfortunately, sitting in the audience was the late Stephen Hawking, and I felt like a complete fool when I made that comment that I did, and I really needed to apologize. So right after the lecture, I got off the podium and went down and apologized. Then he basically intimated, in a difficult way, of course, that I shouldn't take umbrage at what I said. In fact, he agrees with me, and that he himself moves. And I asked him, excuse me? And he said, yeah, I play tennis every day. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, in his head, which got us into the whole issue of imagery. And we started looking at motor activity and synergies in the brain as a consequence of imagined movement. And it makes complete sense when you think of mirror neurons in the motor strip that relate to empathy and feelings and all of that. And these systems link with each other. And when something gets into trouble, when someone or some system gets into trouble, the red light goes off, and that red light, that warning signal is pain. So the approach is, how do you reduce the warning signals? How do you deal with those automatic behaviors that you need to eradicate? And I'm not a clinician these days, but there's certainly enough in the world to point us in that direction. The question that really needs to be asked is, are you automating your behaviors or not? If you are, you shouldn't automate anything other than vital function, because everything is worth looking at. And whatever method is necessary, from walking, moving, running, dancing, by the way, has an amazing effect, a significant effect on the ability to formulate these pathways or reformulate these pathways. There are a lot of people who have done a lot of work on the emotional side of emotions involve neural pathways as well. It's not brain-mind. There is no mind. It's brain. So my suggestion in response to Dr. Shealy's comment is find alternative ways of making pathways, and movement is one of them.
Hi. Oh, I guess we're going to continue it. We'll continue this inquiry, this vibrant inquiry, along with Kai, Paul, and Glenn Brooks for the Vibrant Living Network.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hey, Dr. Phil here. You know, I help people solve difficult problems every day, but one problem has me stumped: childhood hunger. Nearly 16 million children in America struggle with it. Luckily, the Feeding America network of local food banks collects surplus food, giving hope to hungry children and their families. But they need your help. Join me in supporting Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Just taking in all this wonderful wisdom. Listening to the Vibrant Living Network. I'm Glenn Brooks along with Kai Cole. And I played an exhibition tennis match 5 years ago with the former #1 tennis player in the world, Guillermo Vilas. And I'm doing this again. But it's all about discovering movement, because people seem to get injured out of the same chronic movement they live in. And there's this connection to the brain that I find to be quite fascinating. That's why we have the whole speakers connection, just for people that move and want to educate people about movement. Well, I'm really appreciating. This is the kind of conversation when you go to a doctor's office, Kai, that I think, the questions that we ask are so significant. What impacted you with either Dr. Gerry or Norman this last wisdom session?
Well, I'm so glad he brought up the brain's ability to grow new neurons, new pathways, and all of that. Actually, I worked with Sir John Eccles back in 1961. We published 3 papers on our work with neuromodulation, or the ability of the spinal cord as well as the brain to grow new pathways. And so, again, there's nothing as effective as either proper visualization, that is the brain itself, or physical movement. Both those things are critical for retraining the brain.
Kai, I want to make sure get you in here. Oh, go ahead, Gerry.
No, I was going to say, it's kind of interesting. We did a study in my institute, not my work, of how to reduce healthcare costs in the 3rd and 4th ages. That's people over the age of 70 and the 4th age over 80. And the government of Israel, the Social Security Administration, funded that project. And there were about 160 some odd factors that were looked at. And 3 turned out to be significant and accounted for most of the variance in this. One of them was social engagement. The second was movement. And the third was work. And what we're talking about is putting people out to retirement. And when I asked the government, I'm going to probably catch hell for this, but when I asked the government to explain why it is that they funded us to do this project and they had no intention of applying the results, the answer was, well, that came from a research fund and not from a practical fund. It's too expensive to implement it practically. So I'm telling you a real story. So there are a number of things on the table. The science is clearly on the table. Clinical practice, you need some degree of creativity and off-license use of drugs, and also how do you say this? Off normal thinking, divergent thinking, to be able to deal with one's patients. And a lot has to do with the lack of effective communication. That physicians, for example, when they, and I can speak about this as a generalization, they need to have their licenses renewed, are required to have continuing medical education credits. And typically it's drug company related, or it's new kinds of methods for administration of drugs. Oh, we have new drugs now that instead of having to inject every day or take pills every day for someone with behavioral disorders of one sort or another, you can now do it once a month with decanoate. Well, that's not enough. That is, there really needs to be different take on things. When I meet people from different cultures, I learn something about their culture, and it's not the same as mine. I lived in the United States for a very long time, and I just never connected with it. And I was nothing wrong with the U.S. The U.S. is a great place. Not me. And it's the same thing also with how it is that we approach patients and the knowledge base that we have. We need some sort of articulation between all of this, and we need the science underneath it too. So we know that movement is important, but it's not the only thing. We need to deal with pension systems. We need to deal with keeping people at work, or maybe alternative jobs, or how to age gracefully. We need to know something about aging. Hell, I'm a baby boomer, and I'm not particularly happy with what I'm looking at that's coming at me in the not too distant future.
And
with autoimmune diseases,
Gerry. I would
like to. Gerry, Norman's saying something. I'm sorry, Norm. Go ahead, Norm. Say, Gerry. Norm wanted to respond.
Well, I have been working with extending life, or what I call healthy longevity, for the last 12 years, and I discovered in about 2006 and 2007 we could actually regrow telomeres, the tips of your DNA, 3.5% a year instead of shrinking 1% a year. Now, my telomeres are now over 35% longer than when I started. I'm 85 years old. I'm still working, busier than ever have in my life. I don't take no drugs, and I'm healthy. And to me, that's normal. Normal life expectancy, if you have good health habits, is 100. But in America, average life expectancy is 78 because people smoke, are fat as slobs. 70% of people are overweight. 35 to 40% are actually just plain old obese. They eat 2.2 servings of fruits and vegetables a day instead of 5 to 8, which they should. And 90% of Americans do no movement, speaking of your favorite word, no movement at all. They actually sit all day. And when you take those things, those health habits alone take 22 years of life off, plus all kinds of illnesses. So unless we can get people to have the good health habits, there's no point in trying to rejuvenate the telomeres. But if you're willing to rejuvenate your telomeres, you could do it in a maximum of 1.5 minutes a day by stimulating 3 specific circuits in the human body, what I call the ring of fire, the ring of earth, and the ring of crystal. Those stimulated with mixtures of specific essential oils will regenerate telomeres an average of 3.5% a year.
Well, I want to, of course, sign me up.
That's not the only way in. I mean, what Dr. Shilly has indicated is so.
Yes.
But there's so many modulatory avenues in, one of which offers promise, by the way, is low energy laser, which does precisely the same thing. So that's an easy patch. It's much easier. It's much better to have an effective lifestyle, to eat the right food, to move, exercise, and be effective, work, and socially engaged. However, there's some people who don't do that, in which case they're all
most people
as well. Right. So we really need some sort of concerted effort with government planners to be able to bring comprehensive programming to people who are getting to be advanced in age.
Yeah. So we know that, when people move, I mean, one of the stories that impacted me by one of my friend who was a professor, he told the story about this guy try to kill himself every day. But he would attempt to go down to the boat docks to jump off the dock. He didn't have enough energy. But when he finally, it took him a few weeks, he got the energy. He felt so much better. He didn't kill himself. So it seems like, and you mentioned social engagement. Well, social engagement, or what I would call the relational life, changes everything. I think another thing that's going on is people have such tremendous isolation and overwhelm, and they feel compelled to do more because they feel like they're competing against a lot of other people. Kai Cole, what's bubbling with you? I love Kai so much. I want to get Kai's. I feel like we're having this. This is what I like to share with people, stuff they could live and take a path of action with. What path of action, what's moving you when you're listening, Kai, to the conversation?
Yeah, and I'm feeling very strongly about all of the information that's being shared, and my personal experience has recently been with the medicine of the combo frog. I remember Glenn and I had a conversation about, how I guess we can call it alternative solutions, such as this one, though very, very unconventional, allows such a medicine to enter your body and stimulate the lizard brain in such a manner that you are able to consciously discern the patterns that you have been engaging in your life. And it makes for a profound transformation. I remember that I was driving home after a combo ceremony, and I did not recognize the stop sign on the road because it was at that time that my mind was so open to new neural pathways and to new pattern recognition that I actually read the sign for the first time. So there are many, many things that can move us and touch us in this area, and I'm so thankful for the contributions in this conversation by Dr. Gerry and Dr. Norm Shealy.
Yeah, I think I think one of the things that Norm and Gerry are also talking about is, I think the sense of profound meaning, like the sense that people, through social engagement, but also as an example, in China, they had these medicineless hospitals where people would come by the thousands to practice Qigong and Tai Chi. And I know I'm committed to work with couples. It's going to be one of my resources in the back of Divorce the Patterns on Each Other. It's one of my visions to work with couples to experience this other level of movement together. God, movement is something that's so wondrous. I could never get it, and now they say sitting is the new smoking. I could never get it sitting in a classroom. I just felt that my breathing got shallow. I felt like I had to leave my body outside the room and go in a room and collapse and basically collect information in my brain. There was never the sense that there was this relational system that we come alive to. No, it was conforming and regurgitating linear information by memory. I remember reading Dr. Ashley Montague, anthropologist out of Princeton, and he said, love can heal broken bones. And I thought, well, what is that love he's talking about? Because I realized that most so-called scientists and doctors, they don't talk in that language. So this different language and experience called me very early. And when I first started coaching with people, I realized that we've often conformed without even we've done it to, well, even in our movement, our non-movement culture, we don't. It's like almost like a lot of what's expected is we sit, we collapse, and we don't even realize it's a factor in our well-being. Gerry, you want to leave a specific movement practice? I mean, is there something you found? I know your last conference, I think, was in Oxford last year, and it's going to be in Tel Aviv this year. Is there one thing that you found next year in Tel Aviv? Is there something you want to share with the audience around specific movement practices that you think could be, like, it's an example. I know there's a certain percentage of the audience that have neurological injuries. Is there certain movement, things like Tai Chi or dance, that you found to be, like, tell us what you talked about last time about the Parkinson's and how tapping a certain place and they heal.
I'll get to the Parkinson's in a second.
Okay, please.
The thing that I wanted to really complete this line of thinking, with which I wanted to complete this line of thinking, was if we take a look at the nature of life in Western society, what we do is our children, our toddlers, run around the room and they investigate and they play and they have sensory motor experiences of all kinds. However, they get to kindergarten and first grade, and what do? They sit. They sit in a classroom. There is absolutely no reason for them to do that. In fact, we've just completed a study that indicated that 10 minutes of walking between examinations will actually increase students' grades significantly. And so we perform an unnatural act, which is keeping kids in a classroom seated. And so there are behavior problems that come with that, and there are problems with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder that follow from that. But it's an unnatural act. And then what do? As adults, we have cubicles in offices where we sit. We may take a coffee break. Why do we need a coffee break when we should be moving? Maybe we need to change the nature of desks and incorporate into the desk a treadmill. And in order to deal with the problems that aren't being dealt with as a result of societal history in Western civilization sitting behind the desk, we have exercise programs. And these exercise programs allow us to go to the gym X number of times per week. Well, no need to do that if you're moving all the time. So as it relates now to practical examples, we spoke about Parkinson's the last time I was on. And I said that it is essentially, at the end of the day, and there are many problems with Parkinson's, but one of them is essentially not gait freeze or problems with walking, because they're synergy-based spinal responses. What the problem is a disconnect in various pathways in the nervous system that disconnects cognition from movement. So we had said that if you have a Parkinson's patient who can't move, just give him a cane, let the cane bang on the ball of his foot, and he will not have gait freeze, because you're linking the frontal lobes, the cognitive system, with deeper structures, in particular the basal ganglia in the brain. And so what makes for these linkages? And we had said before, BDNF, brain-derived neuroplasticity.
Dr. Gerry, we're going to need to continue. We got we have a lot more wisdom to share, a lot more engagement, and the linear clock is running out. Go ahead and give out the website, please, for your wonderful event, which we're going to be at Harvard. You have a website you want to leave us with today, and we'll get you back on real soon, and we'll continue this wonderful exploration.
Sure. It's www.movementis, one word, movementis.com. And all of the information pertaining to the conference should be on there.
Okay. And we'll be in touch. Honor. Love this exploration. I'm going to go out skipping as soon as I hang out here. Dynamic skipping, by the way. Norm. It's Dr. Norm Shealy. Dr. Norman Shealy. Or is it drshealy.com? I want to make sure people can be in touch with you, Norm.
ShealyWellness.com.
Shealy Wellness. Norm, we've only just begun. I know we're putting our next conference together, and I'm so eager to walk with you. And thank you both. And Kai,
very well.
Thank you for putting everything together, and appreciate you both. If I just enjoy it, keep engaging, keep questioning. Pessimism is a collapsed practice. Go out and take a walk. Stay with us. Thanks for being part of the Vibrant Living Network today. And wholeheartedly thank you, Kai. Appreciate you so much.
Have a good one.